Welcome to selfdiscoverymedia.com, where we discover the communities that are making a difference in the lives of others. Our self-discovery is something we are all making on our life's journey. Here you will find the people that will be your guidance, that will be your inspiration, that will be there for you in support on your journey of life. Do enjoy. Our next show is... Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Their Story Matters right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host. I'm not the guest. I'm your host, Sarah Troy. My guest is Hampton Conway, and we're going to be talking about abused men's stories that are untold. And why are men being treated as second-class citizens? Everything seems to go back to the woman, and the man doesn't seem to have a story because nobody thinks that it's feasible. Well, he is an executive director of the Movement Ministries. He is a father of 10 and an educator of many. He has over 20 years of experience in education and even more in ministry and services to others. His passion is about using his gifts and talents to uplift and inspire others. Will the Department of Justice believe them? That's what he is asking, drawing from his own experience as a battered husband and a father of 10 children who endured abuse. He's passionate about empowering others to effectively deal in all forms of domestic violence. He says, I'm passionate about advocating for victims and survivors of domestic violence due to his own experience. He's focusing on male victims and survivors, but he's collaborated with other organizations and mental health experts to start a support group to help male victims and survivors. He also is working with other local organizations to bring more awareness to male victims and other populations of victims that are not talked about. Other organizations as Sisters for Sisters, Moving for Jesus, DC Alliance for Empowering Homicide Survivors, Voices Against Domestic Violence. There's a lot to talk about here today, and we really need to get going with it because violence on any level is just simply not the answer, but even more so we see it even more prevalent today. The tensions are high in the world right now, and they have been for a while, and people will take it out in anger or in abuse. And as I said, we look at men, you think, how can men get abused? Well, this thing called browbeating, and a woman may hit a man and he doesn't want to hit her back. There's all sorts of forms of abuse, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Right, Hampton? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Abuse. Okay, share your story. How did it happen?
Oh gosh. Well, part of it was initially when I first got married. Well, actually, let me back up. Growing up as a kid, I never talked about it. Wasn't a conversation. Domestic abuse, domestic violence. There wasn't a conversation. I'm sure it was going on in the community around me, but it was something that was just never talked about. It was not like now where social media, you're seeing it happen in real time, and it's been, I think back about the big deal when the Ray Rice did what he did, the football player, and you had this big Why I Stayed movement and all of these different things going on. So, it's different now than it was then, because even growing up, like looking at my parents did not fight in front of me and my sister. So I never heard my dad call my mother out of her name. I never heard my mother call my dad out of his name. I never heard them yell at each other. I'm not saying it didn't happen.
Right.
What I'm saying is we never saw it,
Mm-hmm.
And so when it started to happen to me, I didn't know how to process that because there had been no exposure. There had been no conversation, and I internalized it.
Mm-hmm.
And so now when I'm getting called names or I'm getting cussed at or, different things are happening, I'm thinking, okay, I gotta be a better husband. I gotta be a better man. I gotta, and I internalize it all. And which was part of the reason why I stayed.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also a thing where, because I didn't know how to process it, I surely wasn't going to tell anybody.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like who am I going to tell, that this is happening, especially as a man, right?
Mm.
I felt like I had a certain persona and way I wanted to be looked at and portrayed. And I couldn't tell people that, I was suffering from anxiety and depression and having all these issues because of how I was being treated by my wife at the time. So, it just kind of spiraled. And like you mentioned, you know, a lot of people say, well, man, you don't look like you're a scrawny, you know, dude, why couldn't you just do this or do that? And well, I was raised not to hit a woman.
Exactly.
That's how I was raised. I hit my sister when I was a kid. I hit my sister one time. My father made it abundantly clear to me that that would never happen again. Okay?
And
And it
it
never
stayed.
and it never happened again.
Right.
Okay? With any woman. And so that was just something that I just wasn't going to do. Um and like you said, it comes in all forms. And so yes, while there was physical abuse, the scars from the mental and emotional abuse far outweigh any physical scars that I have.
Yeah.
I'm still working through some of the residue from the mental and the emotional side of it. So
Right.
that's the part that people just really, need to understand that, and especially when it comes to men, because they automatically think about physical and
Yeah.
think, oh, the man should be able to overpower the woman. Well, one, he may not want to hurt the woman.
Right.
And two, it's not always physical.
No. I'm from a marriage of browbeating. So I was browbeated, which people never saw. I saw a very gregarious man, thought we had an extremely happy marriage. Nobody saw the belittling and the demeaning, the chopping you down. And, I call it the piranha at the jugular, until you're just melted in the corner. And I consider myself a strong woman, but, it just over the time definitely wore me down. And people don't realize that is abuse. And that is something that just starts eating away at you, layer by layer by layer. And because it is the verbal abuse, because it's the demeaning, and they never seem to do it in front of anyone else, nobody is going to believe you, right? What did you do to ask for it? And then you start questioning yourself. Well, am I doing something wrong? Right? Should I behave in a different way? Ultimately, when it comes down to it, though, the abuser is unhappy in their own lives.
Absolutely.
And they're taking it out on someone else because they don't know how to deal with it themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things too I try to explain to people that it really is about control. That person the abuser wants to put the person in a position of where they can control them, and it can be, and it doesn't have to be physical to control them. Matter of fact, like I said, I honestly feel like the mental and the emotional stuff is even more prominent and more, when you talk about browbeating, that repeatedly over a series of time just eats and eats and eats and eats away at you.
Yes.
Yeah.
It breaks you down.
It breaks you down.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And so, and that's exactly what they want. When you think about when people talk about wild horses and how they have to break them,
yes,
right, in order to have control of them, and that it's abusers, they try to break your spirit, know, and once they do, because you end up, and I'm sure you can relate to this. There were so many decisions that I compromised on.
Yeah.
Financial decisions, decisions about raising the kids, decisions about jobs, decisions about where we're going to live or the house we're going to buy, or there were so many decisions that I compromised on because I was in a position where either one
was going to be the wrong one.
Right.
Yes.
Or I just wanted to avoid a fight.
Yes.
Or I just wanted to avoid being talked to a certain way. So you just give in, right?
Yes.
And that's really just giving up so much of yourself and giving up some of it's your own control, But that's what that's the strategy, know. And I didn't. It was a long time before I even recognized or realized that what I was experiencing was abuse.
Yeah. Yeah, because people, they're just nagging. Well, you don't realize that kind of nagging and it becomes daggers, because it's like, how can they say they love you,
right,
and then chop you down into little pieces? It doesn't tally, does it?
It doesn't, but you just made me think of something. You triggered a thought, right? So all this is happening, the belittling, the throwing things. I'm getting stuff, I'm getting clothes cut up. I'm getting things that I really, really like that I cherish destroyed or
Ugh.
broken, right? And so the wild thing is, yes, and they turn around and say, I love you.
Mm,
And my children see this
yes,
and they hear this.
yes.
And then they start to formulate a definition of love
Right.
that is not
No,
what love is,
no,
right?
no.
But and this is one of the things where when I'm talking to a lot of people that are get into relationships like this, they know it doesn't feel good, but because of their own experience, maybe growing up in that type of
Yeah,
situation, they normalize it.
you're right.
You know it deep down it doesn't feel good, but hey, this is how it's supposed to be. This is the way it is, and no, it's not how it's supposed to be.
No, no,
That's
that
not the
is
way it
not
should be.
love, folks. That is
Right,
not love at
right.
all. And in a relationship, you need to bring a certain amount of love of self to the
Mm,
relationship, right? If that person doesn't have love of self, a low self esteem, or something in their own lives that they haven't dealt with, they are going to dump it on you, right? Because it's you suddenly become the the culprit. You're the one to blame for everything. Even, I remember my ex telling me I was blamed to his birth. He was born 4 years before me, so that would have been miraculous. And it's like they cannot take any responsibility for the
no,
action they're doing
right.
at all, because what they don't realize is they're in a complete spiral, and they don't know how to get out of it. And
Hmm.
so, really, it is up to the person who's been abused to sever that tie
Yep.
in order for them to even go about and start healing if they want to.
If right, even if they realize at that time,
Yeah.
but you're right. Nothing is their fault.
No.
There's an excuse. There's a blame. It can go all the way around to everyone
Yes.
but them, right?
Yes.
And unfortunately, we can nobody can learn or grow if you don't take responsibility, And so, of course, these are all things I realize now. But of course, when I was in it, I
Yes.
thought she's going to change, she's going to
Yeah.
get better, and you know what I mean. And
Yes.
and and unfortunately, they always say hindsight is 2020.
Yeah.
While you're in it, you don't see things the same way a lot of times. And
No, no.
and yes, it did take me having to honestly, if I hadn't severed, ties, I'd still be in it.
Right.
You
Well,
know
the other thing is the children. I
exactly.
stayed in it because of the children. And it was my children that came to me and said, time to
Mm,
call it quits.
wow.
This isn't working and it's having a negative effect on us.
Right.
Right. Which
Right.
was a very courageous thing, but it gave me permission to sever the
Mm,
ties, because
yeah.
I thought it was only me being hurt, not affecting the kids. But it
Abs-
does affect the kids in so many ways.
yeah, and I'll be honest with you. I carry a lot of guilt. I'm working on it. But
Mm-hmm.
if I'm honest, I carry a lot of guilt around the effect it has had on the kids
Mm-hmm.
and wishing I had left sooner than I did.
Yes.
Now I will say that because I was carrying some of that guilt, when I did have the opportunity to fight for custody of the kids, I fought with everything I
Yeah.
had, and I was awarded, eventually
Oh,
awarded custody.
well, bravo, because in all honesty, that is a rare thing,
It's
a very
very
rare thing.
rare, and when I say and let me be clear, it wasn't easy.
No.
It was for all of the reasons why that it's rare.
Right.
I had to combat all those things going through
Yes.
the court system. I mean, it was incredible that I was really all the people that I was counting on to help me protect my kids.
Mm.
I was actually having conflict with.
Right.
I was having conflict with the police. I was
Mm.
having conflict with judges. I was having conflict with child protective services. And I'm thinking, I what is going on? I'm
Yes.
I'm coming to you all
For
to
help.
help for
Yes.
help, and so it was a tough, 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 tough battle, but ultimately, it worked out in their favor.
Mhm.
And I ended up getting custody of all 10 children.
How did that affect the children? Because for some of them, it's like you're against mom, because they're manipulators, mums, the other person, they can twist things around so much. I have a friend who had 9 kids. He wanted, initially, it was fine. He could see his kids, he could do this, he could do that. And then one day she decided not. And he went to services about seeing his kid. And then she pulled the sexual thing. Oh, he's sexually molesting the kids. Now, you know that once you get down to that avenue, which of course wasn't true, it was just said, you have to prove yourself innocent. They've got you proven guilty, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that's a great question. We're still working through a lot of that.
Yeah,
There not only did so when I got custody of the kids, I had moved out of state. So I had moved to Maryland. Mom was still in Pennsylvania, so that's what made it even harder
yeah,
because the judge was very, very reluctant, despite the kids' testimony, despite my testimony, all these things
mm,
about what was actually happening, because the kids also were getting abused.
yeah,
And so, even to this day, though, so I got custody of them in 2015. It's still tough
yeah,
um, for the kids. One, because they're not with mom and they love their mother, and I
yeah,
encourage
yeah.
them to have a relationship with their mother. But unfortunately, because mom has painted a certain picture of me to them, and continues to do so, um, I have to. And it was funny because there, I was the type of person where I kind of just sat back and I was very careful about what I said, and I pick and chose what I said because I didn't ever want to come off as bashing her.
Right. Yes.
Right? So on one end, I'm trying to be super protective and guarded about what I say and sensitive about what I say to them. But on the other end, it's the total opposite.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
so it got to a point where I realized they are buying into something that isn't completely true.
Right.
So I had to start speaking up just to set the record straight.
Yeah.
Especially when some of the kids would come to me and they would tell me certain things that they understood to be true. Could have been about me, could have been about other family members. And I was like, wait a minute. That's not how that happened. That's not
Hmm.
how that went. And I realized, like, because I had kind of stayed quiet on things,
Yeah. It
the narrative was
validated
her.
what you were saying.
Right.
Yeah.
The narrative was hers to
Yeah.
tell,
Yeah.
And so I was like, wow, okay. So, but to answer your question, it's still something we're working through. The kids have been in therapy, um, and on and off throughout this whole ordeal. It's even tougher because every year or so, mom refiles
Mm.
to get the kids back. So it's like we're back in court, and it's a lot of emotional strain on the kids, and it's a tough situation.
Yeah.
It is a tough situation, but I'm trying to do it as best I can, primarily by giving them an outlet to process things with a professional.
Mm.
But it's tough. It is
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, I mean, my kids were older and they had told me to divorce. So they already knew, it was a mess um and consequently it's been now 20 years for me now. So they've seen me, I'm a totally and utterly different woman now, and they're all
Wow.
grown up. But I said to them, look, your father and I are toxic. We are not good together.
Hmm.
Um, but your relationship with your father is your relationship. And I'm not
Right.
going to interfere with that. I want you to have a relationship with him. And they understand that their father can only give so much, only so much time, only so much love, only so much this. Is just who he is. And they accept him for who he is. Right. We walked, my ex and I walked our daughter down the aisle together.
Wow.
So, we can be in the same room together.
Right.
He's very heavy on conspiracy theories and this and that. And so sometimes he wants to bring everyone down, and everyone says, no, we're not going there. So um, I wish him well, but I am very glad that I'm not in the relationship anymore, because I didn't realize how much I'd lost of myself, which I understand you would have as well.
And I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind,
No.
about that when you just said that you're a completely different person now.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you about that because, and then kind of come back around to a conversation that
Yeah.
I was just having with my daughter last night. But I'm curious about what you mean by you're a completely different person now.
I was, I would say that I used to bend myself into a pretzel trying to be what everybody else wanted me to be.
Mm,
I wasn't enough. He didn't even like me, certainly didn't love me. I was trying to hold it together, for the kids, trying to, what's wrong with me, right? And then when I made a decision in our marriage, I made a decision and started doing some work on me. And basically, I would say to him, take it up with your mirror. That's the only one that's interested.
mm,
And I was taking back my power.
mm-hmm,
And it was a whole rediscovery of who I was and who I could be. And of course, who I am today is I'm in my own empowerment. I'm in my
mm-hmm,
own choice, my own beingness, my own essence. And you can like me or leave me. I don't care. I'm not going to be offended. Whereas before it was this, what can I do to make him like me? What can I do
mm-hmm,
to please him? It would be who's coming up the driveway. You could tell by the way he drove. Is he happy or is he not? What am I? You're always on defense.
mm-hmm,
And I don't
mm-hmm,
live in that situation
mm-hmm.
anymore. So I am in my truth now, right?
Awesome.
But it took work to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so the conversation I was having with my daughter last night, um, I did a photo shoot recently, and one of the pictures that the photographer took of me, um, I keep finding myself staring back at it because he caught me in a very candid moment
Mm-hmm.
where I guess I was laughing,
Mm-hmm.
and I just looked so joyous.
Yeah,
And I keep looking at that picture, saying to myself,
it's there.
I keep saying to myself, I want to get back to that guy.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And
Yes.
it's like, and I don't know. And I was telling her, it's like, because I felt like for so long, I had suppressed so much of
Yes.
me. You know what I mean? Even just
Yes.
my
Oh, I do.
personality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I didn't even have the same personality
No.
necessarily coming out of it. And
Yeah.
it's like I'm slowly, that guy is slowly coming back, and he makes appearances, every now and then, and but I want to be back to him full time, but it's just
It
interesting.
is a process, though.
Yeah,
It is a
yeah.
process, and you can't push it. You just have to allow it. There's going to be times of trigger. There's going to be
Mm,
times where things flare up. 20 years on, we've both moved on with our lives, but still now and again, somebody may say or do something and it takes me back there. The only difference is I can recognize it and go, I don't need to stay there. I'm no longer a part of that. Even though it may have taken me back there in a flashback, I don't have to stay there. I have the choice to dismiss that and move on.
awesome,
You'll
awesome.
get
Yeah,
there. You'll get
yes.
there.
I
And
believe you. I
yeah.
believe you. Hmm.
And, I think also, having the kids and they're going through, the confusion, the push and pull, which happens with this. I didn't want to have that. I just, I'd seen it happen and I didn't want to have that. Um, and, the children, even like my son recently, he's turning 37, but recently kind of went through some coaching and some things came up from his childhood that
Mm,
had been there in his life. And it's like, there was no blame. It was just, it happened and it had an effect on him. And he didn't realize how much an effect it had on him. And
gotcha.
this is going to come up with the kids. It's going to come up with you. And I think be open, be honest about it. Don't suppress it any further. Talk about it, but with
Hmm.
no blame and no shame,
Gotcha. Hmm. Hmm. No, that's good. That's
because
good.
you have to release it. And that's what people don't realize of people that have been abused physically or emotionally, is that there will be triggers and there is the burden there all the time, right there. And you don't realize how much they're carrying and the weight.
And that's why I'm always careful to say that we advocate for victims and survivors.
Yes,
Because just because you removed yourself from the situation
right,
doesn't mean you don't still need support,
right.
and that you don't still need some healing and whatnot. So, yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, maybe if you are in another relationship or not, or whether it's too soon, but
I, I've gotten
I'm
remarried.
you did. Bravo.
Yeah, and which I thought, honestly, I'm the type of person to never say never.
Right.
And I said I never would again, but God saw different,
Hmm.
And yes, I'm blessed to have a beautiful, caring, nurturing, gentle, loving wife.
That
Yeah.
matches your soul.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't ignited your heart and soul and placed importance on that. That you wouldn't have attracted her.
Hmm.
You'd already stepped out of the victim mode because you'd taken on the battle for your children. You'd taken
Hmm.
on the battle to defend other people going through this. You'd already stepped into your empowerment. That's what you matched energy with.
You're good.
We don't realize that energy begets energy. So there
Right.
obviously had to be
Right.
something with your first wife that you started off one way. Maybe she changed because of having the children. Maybe it was chemical. Maybe it was something that was in her past that she wasn't willing to deal with, and instead it came out the other way. There's always so many factors, but
Hmm.
we do attract people at the time of where we're at. So where were
Hmm.
you at that time attracting her?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. That's one of the things I had to reconcile. Yes, this thing happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
For 14 years, I was in this.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to ask myself, what was it about me
Mm-hmm.
that allowed me to tolerate
Right.
this? Right? Because I tolerated things that I know a lot of other people wouldn't have never tolerated.
Right.
You know, but because of where I was, and my own insecurities and whatnot, and my own perspective and ideas about certain things, I allowed myself to endure
Yeah.
a lot of things that I shouldn't have, but I had to go back and really look at myself,
Yeah.
and say, okay, Hampton, what was going on with you,
Yes.
and what was going on inside of you, even before these things started
Yes.
happening, because I think that the me then was a prime candidate
Mm-hmm.
for what I went through.
Right.
You
Yes.
know, I am not now.
Right.
Absolutely,
Right.
those
You're
things
no longer that
that
person.
would never happen. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's certain things like that are just deal breakers for me now. And that's one of the things I got to know with my wife now. And for both of us, like we just gonna there will be no yelling, there will be
Right.
no cursing, there will be no calling. Those are all deal breakers. We knew that right out the gate.
Right.
Like these things are never going to be a part of our relationship. Now, yeah, we understand we may have conflict and have to work through some things, but there's going to be we can do that lovingly,
Yeah.
and
Respectfully.
caringly and
Yeah.
respectfully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you set your boundaries.
Hmm.
Now, it's very
Absolutely.
hard for a person who has been victimized, and you must have seen this through the work that you're doing, for some people to let go. They're so scarred. They've lost their identity. They don't know who they are. And,
Hmm.
you see it over and over again of somebody who's been in a bad relationship immediately go into another relationship that turns out the same or worse.
Yep.
And that's because they haven't addressed the pattern or broken the pattern.
Yep. No, you said it. I mean, and again, not only not broken the pattern, um, I think some people don't even realize or acknowledge or feel like they deserve better.
Right. Right.
Some people really do settle for certain things because they think
That's all I'm
this is
worth.
this
Yeah.
is the best I can do.
Yeah.
And it's so unfortunate, but but that's a reality, and getting people to realize who they are and what they do deserve, that's work within itself,
Yeah.
and but once they do, then they can begin to set those
Yeah.
boundaries and say, okay, I know my worth, and therefore this is where I draw the line. Then those things change. But yeah, you're right, a lot of people, it's hard um to for them to see their way out, or even learn from
Yeah.
a previous situation, because they really haven't gotten to the root of
Right.
the issue or the heart of the matter, and so you just end up, like you said, repeating the same mistake.
Well, we all want to be loved, right?
Absolutely.
And so we chase love, or maybe the next person will love me. And then it all looks lovey-dovey on the first surface. And then, it goes down the same spiral or a different one. Because ultimately, we have to learn to love ourselves first. Then we understand what love is and how to bring that love into a partnership.
Absolutely. And also, if you don't have the proper definition of love,
Right. Yes.
you could be chasing something that isn't good for you because you don't even have that right to begin with, but you triggered a thought. I remember there was a certain point in my marriage where and I was in that place of I've got to be better. I've got to do better. I got to be a better husband, got to be a better man, be a better father. I was reading 1 Corinthians 13 every day.
Mm-hmm.
And for the folks that know the Bible, that's the great love chapter. And so I would read that over and over, and it's saying, love is patient, love is kind,
Yeah.
love is this, love doesn't keep record of wrongs,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm reading over and over and over and over again, and trying to apply it to myself to make sure that's the kind of love I'm displaying, and all the while not recognizing that's also the kind of love I should be getting.
To you. To
And
you.
I'll be honest with you, that seems like such a simple thing.
Yeah.
But I honestly didn't apply it to myself in
No.
that way. It was, for me, it was, I've got to do this. I've got to be this. I've got to do. And I never took the time to say, hey, Hampton,
Yeah.
this is how you're supposed to be getting loved as well. And so I just look back at that time like, wow, I was so consumed with trying to change her by making me better,
Yeah.
which no, you can't change. I've learned that too. You can't change other people. You can be a catalyst for change.
Yes. You could be an inspiration.
Yes.
But
Yes.
ultimately, um, our choice of who we are is up to us. What happens to us, we may not have a choice. How we react to it and what we do because of it is a choice. And, I would say 95% of the people I've interviewed, one today, a woman who was molested and raped um, was a child and then gang raped, with a bunch of boys, and then married somebody who was abusive and lost her child to crib death and then became
Mm.
an alcoholic. She actually did marry somebody who's just a perfect partner for her now. But she realized that if she didn't deal with the pain and didn't let it go, she was never going to find the happiness that was in front of her. And
Mm-hmm.
she had to work through it. And that meant she had to talk about it. That meant she had to
Mm-hmm.
own it. That meant she had to deal with it and ask for help, because we have to go through the process and we're not meant to go through it alone.
You, wow, my heart goes out to her, but I'm glad she's in a better place now.
And she's a
But
real inspiration now. She's quite amazing.
awesome, awesome, awesome. So I sat in therapy for 2 years probably before I really started to open up.
Mm-hmm.
And initially, it was all about what happened to me,
Mm-hmm.
which is an important thing to talk
Yes.
about.
Yes.
But I never brought up other things that had
Mm.
been inside of me from
Mm.
before that ever even came
Yeah.
about. You know what I mean? And so
Yes.
that was the thing, like you said, you realize you've got to talk about it. And so it's
Yes.
like, peeling back, my therapist referred to it as, she said I had a lot of things that were in the basement
Yeah.
and we needed to go in the basement and start bringing those things up. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, but yes, you're right. If we don't deal with those things, they manifest some way or another. They're going to
Yes.
manifest if we don't deal with it. And I've definitely learned that. And that's something I definitely try to encourage, others, to that really, if you really want to be able to move forward and grow and prosper, you gotta deal with your stuff. You know.
And I don't care who you are. We see this rich man, poor man, doesn't matter. It's
No.
we've all got issues. We all need to have to learn how to deal with it. We are in an era where it is okay to be vulnerable. It is okay to talk about it. It is okay to ask for help. It is okay to share your story. This is a wonderful era because we can do that. Our parents' generation couldn't.
That is, use the keyword vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. The
With
greatest gift you can give anybody, your vulnerability and trust.
Absolutely. And I've trying to encourage men to embrace and express vulnerability
Hmm.
with each other, because for so long we've navigated in a way where we all had to put on, we felt like you got to put on airs and, present yourself in a certain fashion, because anything other than that would be a sign of weakness.
Right.
Where we're actually on the contrary, being expressing and embracing vulnerability is strength.
And
That is true
respect
strength.
and trust.
Absolutely. And
Yes.
so, but it's a shift. It's
Yes.
a shift for a lot of men, or people in general. But I find particularly with men too, it's really a shift. Because I always talk to people about how and in my community, the barbershop is where the guys just
Mhm.
talk about any and everything. Well, not really. you know,
Surface
it,
stuff. Yeah.
exactly. The guys, they're not sitting in there talking about let me tell you about how my woman went upside my head last night. Like,
Mm.
that's not going to be part of the conversation.
Yep.
Now, what you might hear a guy say, "Man, my girl crazy,"
Mhm.
or, "Man, my girl tripping,"
Yes.
and it's probably a lot more to that statement,
Yes.
right? But it doesn't go past that, and so it's so much more prevalent than what people realize. This issue of domestic abuse, and men being the victims, it's so much more prevalent than what people realize. One, because guys are suffering in silence.
Yeah.
Uh, some and often they don't even recognize what they're going through as abuse. They just consider it like, this is just my crazy old lady. That's
Yeah.
just, this is just how this goes, kind of thing, and not realizing like, no, this is not healthy. This is not cool, but what I've learned about the vulnerability thing is it's contagious,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I've been over the past year kind of sojourning with a group of guys that really have taught me that, like, hearing them open up and put things out there on the table, has really, and it's just like a fire,
Yeah.
it just spreads. And then, this guy realizes, oh man, wait, you, that happened to you too,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then it's just, and then you realize, yo, none of us are unicorns. Okay.
Right. Right. And that
There's a
everything
lot.
is an illusion, right? Until you pull back the veil. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Have
right,
you
right. And
seen that wonderful series on Facebook of Men Are Enough?
no.
And it's I did a show on it after because I was so impressed. And it's a bunch of celebrities, men, where they're talking about this expectation on them to know it all, to be it all, to be the John Wayne, I can handle anything,
Right, right,
and
right.
the toughness and never sharing, never exposing themselves in the vulnerability, and that it's not the man thing to do, and a whole load of bullshit that it is.
Right, right.
And it's like, well, we don't know how to express ourselves because we've never been taught to, and we've been told we can't. And why is that? Why is it okay for a woman and not for a guy?
Exactly, exactly. I'm about to check that out. I'm about to
Yeah,
check
no,
that
we're
out
really
because
good.
that
I'll
that
send you the
that is
link.
such a relevant conversation. One of the things I've been saying to guys recently is, you know, there are some things, very different about the way God made men and God made women, right?
Mm.
There's just some distinct biological differences, right? But our tear ducts are exactly the same.
And a heart, and a heart,
Right? And our
and a
heart's the
heart.
same.
Yeah, a heart
And
is the conductor.
he gave us the same emotions,
Oh yeah,
and so it's like, we're trying to suppress all of these
yes,
things
which is
that
so
God.
toxic to the body, so
Yep.
toxic to the mind.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
suppression is not good on any level, on
No.
any front, and it will boil up somewhere. So what happens in this dis-ease? We see disease come out. And suddenly somebody's
Mm.
got cancer. 80% of cancer is an emotional disease. We get obviously anxiety, we get depression, we get addiction, right? All of these
Yeah.
things because I can't deal with it. I don't know how to. I haven't been given permission, so I'm going to manifest it in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we
You
have
remind.
to talk about it.
Yeah, you're reminding me of Caroline Leaf right now. I don't know if you know her, but you have to check her out. Um, but yeah, so much of how that stuff plays out in our body, and I experienced, when I was going through this. Oh my gosh, people also I don't think, realize how much anxiety, stress,
Mm,
depression, like you said, suppression. takes a physical toll. I mean,
Huge.
I had chronic back pain, chronic neck pain, migraines, all these different, gut
Yes.
pain, like all these different things that were playing out in my body
Yeah.
because of the stress and
Yes.
the anxiety I mean, it was, incredible, and so not only am I feel like I'm dying a emotional and spiritual death, like i'm I'm hurting my body
Right.
too,
Yes. I
so
developed fibromyalgia due to this because everything went into the
wow.
body. And
Yeah.
like we don't realize like the colon, the kidney, and the liver are the three most important organs because if they're not functioning properly, they can't support the heart or the brain or anything else in the body. And they are the first things when anxiety hits. You talk about your stomach, the
Hmm.
turmoil in the stomach, like a tornado going on. And it then starts having a ripple effect on the rest of your body. It's the same
Right.
when you tense up, when you're afraid or when you're anxious or anything else. It stops the oxygen running through your body, stops the chi, the energy. And that's when it starts causing blockages and you start developing headaches and God knows what else. And so, you
Yeah.
know, the thing about take a breath, take a breath before you react, take three
Hmm.
breaths,
Hmm.
decompress.
Hmm.
A, you're not going to react in the same way. And B, it gives you time to think about how you're going to react.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so, the other thing I wanted to bring attention to is, just with respect to the climate and talking about this from a male perspective, there there's so many. Well, first of all, when we talk about domestic abuse or intimate partner violence, there's so many groups that are
Yes.
dealing with this other than just women. So
Right.
not only just men, but elder abuse is an
Yes.
absolutely those
Oh,
statistics. I sat in a workshop on elder abuse, and the statistics were just absolutely astounding.
yeah.
And then when they also just started explaining like what was happening and how things were, I was just blown away.
Yeah.
And it's something that's just not talked about. You don't
Nope.
hear that.
Nope.
And teen dating violence
Yes.
is terrible.
Mhm.
Even in the LGBTQ community,
Yes.
it's astounding. And so, there's all these groups. I work with a organization called SAFE, Stop Abuse for Everyone, and that's what they do. They try to focus on making this more of a global conversation,
Yeah.
and because what ends up happening is, what they say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? And so I'm not saying by any means that women shouldn't be advocated for and supported and have resources. What I'm saying is, hey, there's some other groups out here too that need help and need resources. When I was in Pittsburgh and wanted to flee my home, there was no shelter for me to go to.
Right.
Right, so I'm sleeping in my car in a
Mm.
abandoned mall, Walmart parking lot, because most times I couldn't afford to go to a hotel.
Right.
And random places. At one point I was a principal, and so I could go back to my school building, and I would sleep in my office or the teachers' lounge, and then get up and change before the staff realized I'd spent the night there. And so, but for me as a man, there was no shelter
No.
for me to go to.
No.
Um, it's also interesting. I went to a training once I decided, okay, this is my experience. I wanted to learn more about myself, but also be able to advocate for others. I started taking these different trainings, and you've probably heard of the Duluth Power and Control Wheel.
No, I
Have
haven't
you seen
actually.
that? So there's
No.
this. It's a wheel. It's a power and control wheel, and it talks about all the different aspects of domestic violence. And this is
Mm.
probably one of the most popular tools that's used in training. And it's talking about the wheel. It talks about how there's a cycle, and each section has different verbiage and talks about different aspects. But the language in it is all when he does such and such to the woman,
Right.
when he
Yeah.
isolates her from her family and friends, when he
Yeah.
tries to da 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 da. And so here I am at this
Mhm.
workshop getting trained, and while I agree with all the concepts of what's in this wheel, it was excluding me
It should be
just
what
based.
they. Right, what
you
they
know?
go
And
through.
so it
Yeah.
was just interesting, like, wow, this is the tool they're using to train people, but they're excluding
Including.
men
Yes.
from
Yeah.
even being a part of this conversation in this way. And
Right.
so and so now since then I've seen other wheels where people have adapted it. But I still to this day I go to trainings, and that will be, and I will pull people aside and say, hey, you need to update your will. Because there, but that's just one example of how we still have a ways to go with expanding this conversation and helping people understand this isn't just a one faceted, one-sided
Yeah.
thing. And like I said, even I believe judges and
Mm.
police and a lot of people just need to be better trained about this topic. Um, Not only understanding that men are victims as well, understanding how it affects children, because
Domino effect, right?
yeah, and I have some beef with some judicial folks, um, because they're making ill-informed decisions.
Mm.
So if you just imagine you've got a judge whose responsibility is to decide where a child is going to go.
Right.
And if they're not properly trained and understand the effects of trauma and abuse in children, they may not make the right decision. And so that's a big deal. And I can honestly say there are times they have not made the right decision.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
and so the train. There was a time where I called the police. I was in my home, and typically I got really good at being able to tell when a fight was coming.
Hmm.
Right? Yeah, I got good at knowing something was going to blow up. But this, and usually I would leave the house when it got to that point. I would grab my keys and just go to, because I really got to a point where I was like, you know what? I may not be able to protect myself all the time, but I can't let the kids continue to see this happen
Right.
or hear this happen. And so, we had that conversation, and I told her at the time, I said, listen, I said, if you do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to leave. I'm going to walk out of the house until you get yourself together, cool down, or whatever, because we're not, I said, we can't continue to expose the kids to this. And we were seeing definitely the effects in the kids, hypersensitivity and hyper
Mm.
emotionalism and all these different things, right? It was manifesting. And I was like, you know what? This is not good. So anyway, this one particular time, I can't remember. I think she might have hidden my keys or whatever the case may be,
Hmm.
and blocked, obstructed my way out of the home, and I couldn't get out. So I called the police. Um, the police got there, and when they got there, she runs out the house,
Yes.
screaming and carrying on,
Yes.
and I was like, oh my god! And so they tried to arrest me,
Right.
and I'm like, guys, I made the call. Like,
Yeah.
they didn't want to hear it. They
Nope.
didn't want to consider it.
Nope.
I'm like, dude, you know what I mean? And so in the end, because she didn't have any physical scars on her,
Right.
they were like, okay, we're gonna tell you what, we're not gonna arrest you, but you got to leave. I'm like,
Yeah.
was I supposed to be grateful at that
Right.
point? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, okay, thanks. But I'm the one who called. So it's
Yeah.
things like that that just, it's
Well,
just
I
like,
mean, there's the whole thing about defunding the police, and I think no, the funding should be that the police needs to have social workers working with them, child advocates,
yes,
abuse advocates, people who understand what's going on, even autism and mental
yeah,
conditions.
yes,
They're not equipped, they're not trained
right,
to assess the situation and see it for what it is. And they need these people with them to say, this isn't, a violent person who's about to shoot everybody up. This is a person in trouble. We need to talk them down, or we need to do something else. We need to look at the situation in a different way. And I
yeah,
really do believe that the funding needs to change according to that, because we really are seeing an awful lot of police that should never be policemen, because either they're petrified and they'll shoot first, or they're bullies,
right,
and they'll shoot
right,
first. And, most certainly people of color are most certainly, the victims of this. And in domestic violence, If it's a man of color against a woman, they'll always blame the man because it's always, you're the thug, you're doing this. The woman couldn't be possibly a victim of it because they just look at stereotyping, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I while I was fighting for custody, because that's a long process.
Mm-hmm.
I was here in Maryland. The kids were still back in Pittsburgh with their mother. Things kept happening where the kids were calling me concerned, upset, hurt, and I had to keep going back to Pittsburgh to file for protection from abuse orders.
Mm.
I kept getting denied. And listen, I remember the first time I went up, I had written out, I had to write out all the kids' names on the paperwork. And the first thing this judge said to me, she looked at the paperwork, looked up at me, and she said, "You think I'm gonna give you custody of all 10 of this woman's children?" I was like, "Ma'am, those are also my children."
Yeah.
But she just assumed
Yes.
something else. And I'm just
Yes.
like, holy cow.
Yeah.
This is how this is. Now, mind you, that's how it started.
Right.
So if that's how it started, I'm just telling you, I could take a whole nother 3 hours telling you about what dealing with the court system was like. It was incredible. And I think, one, honestly, being a man in the situation and also being a black man, like,
Yeah.
I really think, being a black man in the system who was actually fighting for his kids was
Yeah.
like,
Something they probably don't come across too often.
so yeah, it was tough. It was tough. But you're right. I agree with you with respect to the training, the money putting towards
Mm.
the right resources.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Aside from the guys the police that are the bullies and just
Right.
in it for the wrong reasons, there are good police that
Yes.
they just can't be everything to
No.
everybody, right? They don't
Right.
have the wherewithal to be that,
Right.
and so that is a great point.
Yeah. Yeah. The other problem is that the pandemic has caused a great deal of stress. At first, it was a great reflection. People paused in their life. They could see what's really important and pivot. And then it went on and on and on. And now you've got the non-masking and non-vaccinating and non-this and non-that. And it's become pitting against each other again, because it just seems to be that humans like to pit themselves against each other instead of looking for common ground. And we're seeing the tensions are so high out there right now, and which makes everything more volatile.
Yeah, and I remember last October. Of course, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and last October, participating in a lot of different events and hearing from a lot of different people, and hearing the statistics on domestic violence since the pandemic had started.
Mm,
And more organizations actually were talking more about men as victims
yeah,
because so much of what was filtering through the criminal
yeah,
justice system, there were people were saying they were seeing a trend with a lot of women as perpetrators.
yes,
And so, now obviously I wasn't happy to hear that this was happening, but it was good to know that some of these organizations that hadn't
paying
been
attention.
focused
Mm,
right, that I've been working with before, and even it's funny because even some of the same organizations I had reached out to
yes,
and didn't get a peep from,
right.
now we're calling me saying, "Hey, can
Hmm.
you come talk? Can you know what I mean?" Because these statistics were coming out, and they were realizing, okay, this is a bigger deal than what we initially, thought it was.
Do you find that the emphasis is on people of color as opposed to the white people, or the white people don't do this? Yes, they do. It's behind the closed doors, right?
Actually, this is one of those topics where that has not been a thing.
Mm-hmm.
When people talk about this, it's across the board.
But yeah,
It is across the board. And like you said earlier, rich or poor,
yes.
right? There's doctors and
Oh
lawyers
God.
and
Yeah,
ministers, and I mean, this thing, when you talk about it, this thing goes all the way across the board,
right.
and so organizations are very good about putting that out there. I've never had an issue with someone painting a picture with respect to just a particular race or particular
Good.
class. They've done a very good job because no, this thing, I mean, people would be surprised
Yeah.
at some of the people that are perpetrators.
Right.
And so yes, and a lot of times they're revered in their community,
Hmm.
right? These folks, they're officers, political officers, or whatever the case may be, people that people love. But like you said, behind closed doors, it's a whole nother story. But yeah, it definitely is all the way across the board. People are good about talking about it in that way.
I think, what a big problem is the shame and blame. It's shameful to be going through. What kind of man are you that you allow this to happen? Why didn't you just knock her about? And it's, and it's like, no, there is no shame and blame here. There's an understanding of the situation that needs to be rectified.
You keep making me think of different things. Um, like I said, this wasn't something I was telling anybody about, right? I was keeping this to
Mm.
myself. Very early on, maybe 4 years in, 3 years in, I took a chance and I said something to a pastor. I told him what was happening in my home and what the abuse that I was receiving. His comment to me was, "So you just gonna let her do that?"
What did he expect you to do?
So there you go. So when you say shame and blame,
Yeah.
immediately I'm like, "Oh, okay." I didn't know how to take that.
And
I
what did
didn't
he
know how to
expect you to do?
listen.
Isn't he meant to be a person of non-violence and conflict?
How about it? How
Yeah.
about that, right? And so, but this just also goes to show. It's a committee I was on a few years ago. One of the things they were trying to do is get church leaders, faith leaders trained
Yes.
because very often
That's what
they will
people turn
give
to.
ill
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah.
They'll go,
Yeah.
congregant, woman comes to Pastor so and so and says, "My husband's beating on me." Pastor so and so calls up the husband and says, "Hey, no, that's absolutely the wrong thing to do."
Yeah.
Right? And so or all the other stuff like, well, you just got to pray and
Give it up to God. Yeah, well, God is
yeah,
actually saying, I need help and looking for the person who's going to
right.
help for it. Yeah.
Right. So, so it's even, I talked about judges and police and child protector, but faith leaders need trained as
Oh,
well
yeah.
because they're in positions to have people that are in need coming to them, but often those people are coming to them and they don't know how to serve that population.
Well, I mean, in a
So,
lot of religions, before you get married, they do this whole workshop with, what to
absolutely.
expect out of it. So, how about taking it a bit further about, what goes wrong in a marriage and how, when a marriage really, needs to part because it's not good for each other, and when they need to be guided in order to find their way back. So, if you're doing one thing, why don't you take it further?
That's a whole nother conversation. A lot of times premarital counseling and stuff like that is I feel like people are just going through the motions.
Yeah.
Like they're not necessarily doing it
Mm.
because they want counseled. And
Yes.
even some people that do the counseling, it's like, okay, this is protocol. We're
Right.
going to meet. We're going to talk. And what date is the marriage again? What date is
Yeah.
the wedding? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so now, not to say I do know personally know some folks that, I mean, their premarital thing is like, it's going to expose you. It's going to make or break you. Y'all might not make
Right.
it through that. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So there are
Rather
some
now
that
than later.
right. There
Yeah.
are some that approach it like that, but I think too often there's some that don't. It's just kind of going through the motions, and because people have their mind made up, and
Yeah.
that's going to be that.
We've taught now a great deal more about depression
Hmm.
around how depression hurts. And so many celebrities have come out and talked about depression. So many people have come out and talked about the sexual abuse that they've been through. And, so many others are coming out. And I think what it does, it gives permission for people to speak up and say, okay, I'm not alone. I don't need to be shamed because this happened to me. I do need to talk about it because that's the only way I'm going to take my empowerment back.
Hmm.
And again, the men code is don't say anything because it shows a sign of weakness, is balderdash. I think the greatest strength in a man is to admit that he's in pain or that this has happened and that he wants to rectify it in some formal way, because that is a sign of strength and courage in my books. And we need
Absolutely.
to paint it that way, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a huge, huge, huge concept. And that's one of the things, I know in the group of men I'm in, we try to do, and we try to bring other men and just try to redefine. I used to say redefine manhood, but I think instead of saying redefine manhood, get folks back to what manhood is and always should have been. Um,
Re-embrace.
yeah, re-embrace, and because like you said, a lot of folks' definition of what it means to be a man,
Yeah.
that we buy into is not. And here's the thing: it's not just men that buy into that,
Yes.
right? So if you've got a woman or a mother even telling her son, "Suck it up,"
Yeah. Yeah.
get over it, grow up, right? So it's not just men, and so we've got to really just change that mindset, for folks, because you know when you do, embrace it and understand it better. Everybody's better. The person's better. The people around them are better. It makes everybody better, and you don't have these other things manifesting
Yeah.
that just lead to, like you said, it's just
Unknowingly, it's my dad died when I was 11, but I was witness to not necessarily the fighting, but it was the jabs, it was the belittling. My mum was a bit of a martyr as well. So instead of standing up for herself, my dad would just keep putting her down. I went to a different country, married somebody of I married an Oriental guy, thinking he would be completely different. I married my father, 10 times
wow,
worse,
wow,
right? Because it's what you know,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it's already, I had a low opinion of myself. And so you're looking for someone to complete you, to validate you. Bullshit, guys. No, you do that for yourself.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah,
So
absolutely,
we don't realize we're repeating patterns. We don't realize that that is even a pattern inside of us until it manifests. And we need to be brave enough to even say to each other, what that your dad went through this, or you're repeating something, or are you aware of, and don't look upon it as a criticism or attack, but as an observation that you now can turn your eyes in on yourself.
absolutely, yep,
But talking about it, that's the key, isn't it? Talking
it
about
is.
it. We don't heal until we give permission to that person's story. This particular genre is called Their Story Matters. Everybody's story matters. And unless somebody has a voice to express their story, they're never going to heal, and they're never going to find themselves, and they're never going to be the true product and purpose that they were designed to be.
Absolutely, totally agree. And I think people's and I guess for me, I've gotten to the point now where even now sometimes some aspects of it are difficult to still talk about,
Yeah.
but I understand now. One, it's therapeutic for me,
Yes.
uh, and it's eye opening and healing for others.
A
And so
story
if the
shared, right?
yeah, and so if the least I could do is pull somebody else up or help
Mm-hmm.
pull somebody else out of that same darkness, and all I have to risk is my own temporary little feelings about being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's worth that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can take that just to because what you get out of it is so much more beneficial, and I've seen men, you know I've had the experience of men pulling me aside after a talk, and they may have been there because they were I've been in events where a guy, he's there supporting his wife
Right.
because she's one of the speakers, or
Yeah.
or whatever, or a vendor at an event or whatever. And so a guy pulls me aside after I've talked and will say, hey man, I've never told anybody this, but
Yeah.
and I remember a situation where it's like this guy had to be like 60 years old, remarried at this time,
Mhm.
and he pulls me aside after an event after he heard me speak up and talk about my situation and told me his current wife didn't even know this is something he'd gone through.
Right.
I'm like, dude, all these years you've been holding on to this and have never told
Not
anybody
good
about
for
this.
you. Not good for
Right.
you.
And he's, and I just, but just imagine how many, and that's what I just
Yeah.
keep thinking about. How many guys are out here
Yes.
just holding on to this, even if they're not currently in it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something from the past, but they still haven't gotten to a place where they felt comfortable to say something. And what I realize is, I can post stuff on social media all day.
Hmm.
I don't get responses from men that way.
No.
It's when they hear or see me
Yes.
talking about it, it's like something opens up, and I'll get consistently. Guys will pull me aside and be like, "Hey, man, can I talk to you? I think the situation I'm in now, that sounds like, you know what I mean." And so, and that's one of the reasons why I do it, because I know if I get in front of some men and say, "Hey, this was me too. I felt helpless. I felt hopeless, but it doesn't have to be that way."
Right.
You know, let me help. So
And
there is help.
especially when it comes to children, because a lot of the time people don't want to rock the boat because of the kids,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they don't want the mudslinging that's going to go on and the fight. And it's like, sometimes that's inevitable and you're not going to be able to avoid it. But there are ways of doing it, and you need support while you're going through it. You
Yep.
need avenues of outlets to help you while you're going through it. And so, when you've got a community of men that have been through it, who know the ins and outs, so just know how to be that support, it's so much healthier, A, for the man, B, for the situation, and C, for the children.
Yeah, and I tell guys, I say, listen, man, by no means, and I'm telling you, this process is going to be easy.
Yeah.
By no means,
No.
but if you let me, I might be able to help make it easier.
Yeah. Yes.
you know,
Yes. And isn't it better than what you're in right now? Do
right?
you want to go for another 20, 40 years in this situation, or do you want to brave up and face it head on now and go through this process and become what you want to become at the end of it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's everybody's challenge in life. That's what we're here for, is our self-discovery of who we really are. What is our instrument? Which orchestra do we play it with? And we're all going to have a battle along the line. It's how we face that battle, who we become because of that battle, and
Mm-hmm.
how it serves others in the
Yeah.
end, because we're
Yeah.
here to be of service to one another.
Absolutely. I like the orchestra illustration because, right, if orchestra is beautiful because of the way everybody plays their particular instrument,
Yes.
their respective instrument
Yes.
together, right?
Harmoniously. Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, we are the individuals that we are responsible for ourselves and what we do with our lives, and what's happening to us. We can change. We have that empowerment to do that. That's our choice. But we are meant to be a part of the collective. And we are meant to be
Mm-hmm.
of service to one another, contribute. And the best human being you can be, the better you are going to be at serving your community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your community, you owe it to your family. And when you look at some people who have it all and they're really at the top of the ladder, and you hear their stories of how they
Mm-hmm.
got there and how they fell and what they had to go through to pick themselves back up, and that they would do it all over again to be where they are now,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So you're not alone. That's the big
Nope.
thing for people to
No.
understand.
Yep.
It doesn't matter that you're a man. We believe you when you say you're going through abuse. We're there for you, but you've got to be willing to step up and go through the process.
Yeah. Yep.
And there is a way out.
Absolutely.
There is an end in sight.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, what are you offering people right now? How can they get hold of you? What kind of services are you giving?
So, right now the we had a focus group. I'm sorry, support group. Uh, that we want to start to work on getting that back started up again since COVID. Um, it kind of deteriorated, but we want to definitely get that back going. And it was a support group for men because what I realized when I was going through it, I looked for a support group
Yes,
and
yes,
I couldn't find one to fit my situation.
right.
And I'm in the Washington D.C. area. I figured this melting pot,
Yeah,
this population, like there's gotta be something for
Right.
me, somebody in my situation. And I mean, I found meetups and support groups for everything under the sun.
But
Some of the weirdest things you'd
yeah.
ever find a support group for, but I couldn't find one for my situation. So I said, well, maybe I'll start one. And so, um, our my organization, Movement Ministries website is makemoves.org.
Yeah.
And so, in addition to the support group, though, if you're just need resources or
Mm,
support, if you're in the situation or if you know somebody who's in an abusive situation, we can get you to the right place. And it doesn't matter that I'm in DC and you may
yeah.
be in Oklahoma,
Timbuktu. Yeah.
right? We will, if we don't have the resources, we will get you in touch with the right resources to be able to help you or help you help a friend
Yeah.
or a loved one
Mhm.
navigate their situation. And so that's some of the primary things we're just focused on right now. And we also do some programming with returning citizens. So that's some other project we're working on and helping them transition back into society as well. But yes, it's going to be a busy month next month because it is
Mhm.
Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so I'm sure I'll be doing a lot of speaking and things like that. But yeah, makemoves.org. That's how you can reach us at Movement Ministries. Safe, Stop Abuse for Everyone's. That is another organization that has a bunch of resources to help all populations, which I think is very important. And not enough, like I said, not enough of those other populations are being talked about and being supported in this situation as well.
Thing is, we don't know what's out there until we need it.
True.
And
Yeah.
I've just done a veteran show. And one of the things I noticed about the veterans, they came back and found the support they needed wasn't there. So they created it themselves to support other veterans.
Yeah.
They've become each other's strength.
Yeah.
And so why can't men be there advocating for men and be
Yeah.
each other's strength? If it's not there, create it. If it's
Yeah.
not there, talk to you about how it can happen, right? Because
For
you want
sure.
to make the moves. Everybody wants
Absolutely.
to make the moves, but you're not alone. You don't have to be alone. You just have to be willing to move
Yeah.
in the
Absolutely.
right direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing your story. Thank
Thanks
you
for
for being brave.
Yeah, well, thanks for taking the time to use your platform to have this conversation.
It's a needed conversation. Abuse on any level, on any person, any living thing, any animal, even the planet.
Mm-hmm.
This abusive cycle that we're in has to be dealt with. And the only way we're going to deal with it is talk about it, get the resources out there, and start addressing why it's there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Because we never look at the root cause. We're always
Right.
band-aiding the system, the
Yep.
problem. And we need to start getting at the root cause and turning it around before it becomes a problem. The only way we're going to do that is supporting people like yourself and making the moves.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Awesome.
thank you very much.
Thank
Folks,
you.
it's October. Abuse, no month should just have an abuse. Abuse is every month, every day. If you know somebody that's been abused, step up for them. Don't let them feel like they're alone and they're isolated. Man, woman, child, it doesn't matter. It's a senior. God knows the amount of teenagers that are abusing seniors right now is just disgusting. There is a root problem out there. The only way we're going to deal about it is if we each and every one of us step up in some way, in some form of support, and don't turn a deaf ear to it or a blind eye. This needs to be looked at, and the only way we can do that is facing it head on. So until next time, folks, bye for now.
We hope that you enjoyed the show. To find many more shows of inspiration, please go to selfdiscoverymedia.com podcasts, and you will see an array of shows to choose from. Please do visit our www.discoveringcommunities.org and see what else that we have in store for you. Do enjoy our next show.